Good morning and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Buddy. Just a quick shout out to The Rec for hosting the podcast each week. The Rec, way more than a bowling alley. We drop a new podcast every Friday morning with a new story that will impact someone, and we hope that someone is you. I just wanted to say thank you again each week to all the listeners who take the time to hear the stories of our guests. Please take a moment to subscribe to our podcast, give us a review, and share this podcast with your friends, family, and on your favorite social media platform. We want to get these messages out to the people and to impact the world one testimony at a time. By the way, if you want to be on our show, be a guest, or if you know of somebody that wants to be a guest, we would love to chat with you and get you on here. This morning, I'm excited to introduce my friend and guest, David Giglio. Welcome, David.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you on here. You're really one of my favorite people. You may or may not know that, but I really dig you. I think you're a cool dude. And you and I have had a lot of great conversations over the years. And I like our meetings that we have roughly once a month.
Yeah, no, you're also one of my favorite people as well, buddy. I feel like we've also had this chance to start meeting more regularly, which has been amazing. And you're also, I was thinking about this today, is like you're also like you were when I was first starting the company, Skykine Video Productions, you were like one of our first clients. And I remember like just how encouraging that whole process was, and all just learning through that. And I just think you're someone that really exemplifies how to live the Christian life in business, in the world, in a way that's just open, loving yourself, and just a great encouragement. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Well, brother, thank you. It's funny, when I remember that when you guys did the videos for our team, I didn't know you were new because you guys were highly professional. Seriously, like it was big time. So I didn't know that, but good to know.
That's the whole like say fake it till you make it.
Fake
right?
it till you make it. It worked.
It's true. It's like, I mean, I think we did good work, but yeah, it was one of our first. I think it was one of our first paying gigs anyway.
Yeah.
Because we spent like basically a year just doing free, really cheap portfolio building work, and then we started to. Yeah.
And now you're what, 5 years into it?
6 years. Yeah.
6 years.
Just past the 6 year mark. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we have a lot to talk about. So we're going to talk about Skykine Video Productions. So let me just do a quick intro of you. I made you kind of send to me what was the highlights. I know you pretty well, but I'm going to read yours word for word just because it's you. And I want to introduce you. So number one, you said, I'm a friend of God and it's the best. I would agree. 2, I'm a husband and father who's been blessed with the best wife and 2 kids. So introduce your wife and then also talk about your 2 kids. And I know Sully has cerebral palsy. What you did say about Sully is that while it's hard, it's also been one of my richest blessings in my life. So tell me about your wife's name, how long you guys been married, and then your kids.
Yeah, so my wife, Olivia, we met at Corbin when I was going there about 8-9 years ago. And then, we've been married now for 6 years. And yeah, she's amazing. And when I remember when I first met her, I was actually dating somebody else, and I eventually broke up with this other person, and we started dating. And I remember having this conversation, I think, with my mom, and I was like, man, there's this girl, and when I'm around her, I just feel at peace, you know? And I remember the first conversation we had, it was just like we knew each other like our whole lives. And she's been such an incredible person. I can't ask for anyone else. And then I have 2 kids, Nova, who's 4, and she is just incredible. She's a lot like me, very, very outgoing and crazy. And then Sully, his actually name is Samuel Solzhenitsyn Giglio, but we call him Sully. And he, when he was, his story is that when the 20-week ultrasound, I remember getting the call, and Olivia was just sharing with me that they thought that she had just gotten the call, and they thought he was going to die in the womb, and that they had very, very little fluid in there. And I remember, man, that was just such a crazy time, just that shock of he's gonna be there, and then going into the doctors and just them even just being like, you know, a lot of people would end this pregnancy, and you know, we were not gonna do that. You're gonna stay with it, and then just slowly that whole process of going into OHSU, finding some answers that he actually had a viral infection. And I'm actually blanking on the name. I know it. I've said it 1,000 times, but I can't think of it right now. But a virus that affects the fetus, and he was just sick, basically. Mm-hmm. And but that sickness really affected his growth and really his brain development. Yeah. And so from that, he basically has too many folds in his brain. And so with that, there's a lot of things like, he was a pretty mild-ish form of cerebral palsy, and affects his vision and hearing, but man, he is the best. He is such a joy every single day, and watching him just learn to walk, and he's in a walker now, and just taking some steps. How old? And he's 2. Yeah, he's 2 now. So that's just been an amazing story and journey. But yeah, that's my family. That's the long version.
Yeah, we'll talk more about family in a little bit. Number 3, you say, I'm a youth and worship pastor in Staten, whose passion is to reach youth and seek the face of Jesus. 4, I part own a small business called Skykine Video Productions, which we talked about here in Salem. You say, I'm a Staten City counselor. Number 6, I went to Asbury Revival in February, and Jesus has brought personal revival in my own heart, life, and call. We're going to talk about the word revival because I want to hear more about what that really means. And then lastly, number 7, my passion and the call of my heart is that our children would know no other church than that filled with the glory of God. I like that. All that was awesome. And then what's funny is you and I were talking about how much coffee we had for breakfast, and you said, I think you said this, self-medication for ADHD. Is that what you said coffee was?
That's right, yeah. Okay. It's my self-medication for my self-diagnosis of ADHD.
Okay,
yeah.
There you go. Well, that's right. First of all, we have a lot to talk about, so it's going to be really awesome. I can't wait to really dive in. And, you know, life it's been good to you, right? Would you say? But
yeah,
also challenging to you, because how else could you grow without challenge?
Yeah, no, God's blessed me in so many ways. Like I've been thinking about just that throughout my life, there has been this like favor, and He's opened so many doors and given me opportunities at such a young age that were just incredible. But again and again, challenges and those obstacles have come as well. And those are the places where we grow. Absolutely.
We don't want them though, do we?
No, we don't.
Lord, make those obstacles go away. But he's like, no, I need you to grow, David, in this area. Really not even for your own purpose, but for the purpose of someone else.
That's right. True? Yeah. Well, I would say that the recent story in my life really started, like, I would say like even the lead up to going to the Asbury Revival was, it was earlier that month where our business was going through some really tough financial challenges and all that stuff. And I was struggling with it. And actually I lashed out. It was the morning, I was getting up and I was at an elders meeting, and I kind of lashed out in kind of a way that wasn't good, right? And it was prideful, and I was just kind of in my time with God after that, and just kind of wrestling with that like conviction, and it was weird because really for the first time, I remember just feeling this overwhelming sense of joy that it was happening, that this challenge, this like thing was happening, even from the financial stress, which is probably the reason I lashed out, to the lashing out, was like thankful that it was happening because I felt this overwhelming sense that God was like, no, there's so much more for you. And the only way you're going to grow is going through this, and not running away from it in any way, but going through it. And so that was kind of the first piece of it. But like since then and my whole life, learning to embrace the discipline of the Lord as love is huge.
That's like a mic drop right there. Boom.
Well, it's like it is Hebrews 12 is such a powerful chapter where it's like God only disciplines those he loves. And so when we are disciplined by the Lord, we see it as this sign of love when we're walking with Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And then he talks about there's these roots of bitterness that can grow, and really trying to be and those two roots of bitterness are sexual immorality and like the Esau, like I'm going to go find a bowl of soup instead of the birthright Jesus is giving me. Yeah. And I think those are really summed up by pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure and comfort, right? That we're like, God, this is uncomfortable. This is not pleasureful, right? Like all those things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go seek it around you, go like shortcut what God's doing so that I can feel better in a moment as opposed to receiving it.
A pandemic or epidemic of people on drugs and alcohol and overeating, and because we're seeking comfort, but we can't find it in this world, can we, other than Christ? Absolutely.
I mean, it's I think I was listening to the Mitch Anderson podcast that you sent me, and it's so true. It's like that contentment, that I am restless till I find my rest in you. That it's Ecclesiastes, really. Like Ecclesiastes, that whole book it's like I've heard it described as like the lye soap of like the Bible, right? It's actually one of the best examples that I think the Bible should. The Bible's so amazing because the Bible is such good philosophy too. Like it's so true. Like you read Ecclesiastes and you're like, nothing lasts. It's all smoke. If you can't hold on to it, you might feel it for a second, but that pleasure, that comfort is going to dissipate. And that's all supposed to call us to God. It's all supposed to be this thing that like, no, life isn't going to satisfy. It's never going to satisfy apart from Jesus. But then Jesus, he is the living water and he is the bread of life and he is what satisfies. And I think even Christians, we often live on the edge of that, like that, even believing that Jesus really satisfies and he really is the bread of life. But yeah, I think it was even like, there's this George Herbert poem that I remember reading a long time ago, and I can't remember the specifics, but it's just like God gives his children all these gifts, but the one thing that he holds back is rest, because rest calls us to him, pushes us to him. It's like God-shaped hole in your heart, right? It's like all of these ways that we try to say the same thing, but we know we're incomplete without God, without something more.
Matthew 11:28, one of my favorite Bible verses, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." It's only when we come to him. It's nowhere else, is it?
No.
Wow.
And what a powerful verse. And I think really a verse that is so much, I think for our for I think in general, men, women, but also I think take that to millennials and Gen Z, and you think about the effects that social media have had in particular on kids, just the ways that I think kids have been isolated, and this generation has been isolated more. And you just see, I mean, the records are just off the charts of anxiety and depression and loneliness and I think there's really a lot to be said for like very few generations have been attacked as heavily by the enemy, I think, as these generations, from the lies about, I think, gender and sexuality, from the lies around just stress and anxiety and all of that. There's so many false hopes that just leave, I think, kids really, really, really like hungry and needing something. And so that promise of rest, I think that Jesus is giving to that generation in particular, and I think to all of us, but I think there's just a particular, like, I don't know, it feels like the core of what he's doing in the world right now. Like it feels like the core of, I think what God is calling people into.
Yeah. That's good, man. That's deep. Hey, let's go back a little bit and really, let's get to know who David is, and then we'll get to some good stories when we want to hear about revival and what God's doing in your heart today. But back us up. Where were you born, raised, what your parents like, and just give us a little bit of a history of who David is.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Staten, which is where I live now.
Big city.
Staten, which is like, I think anyone in the area knows where that is. It's 15 miles to the east of Salem, and a smallish town. I grew up loving Jesus, right? My parents loved Jesus. There were definitely difficulties in the home at times, but they all love Jesus, right? And even from an early age, I can remember, and this is a very interesting story because even out of Asbury, I used to feel a lot of shame around my childhood and teen years in particular. Like I would definitely like look back and I would feel nothing but almost this very immense shame around it. But even recently, there was an event that happened, I think a couple months after Asbury, where I was just literally in the shower and it was like God kind of like opened my eyes to what he had been doing my whole life. And it was just a very fascinating, interesting thing. So yeah, I think from the very early age, I desired to see God, to know God, to talk to God. And I became a Christian when I was 4 or whatever. And
really? That's funny.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think it was real. Like, I think there are times where I would rededicate my life and it would become more real, struggle with real sin. But I think I've been walking with Jesus that whole time. In 12, 13, that time period, I think it was like 8 and 9, had kind of an experience with a cousin that kind of opened kind of exposed me to some sexual stuff earlier than was good, and pursued kind of, I think, porn at an earlier age, probably like, I think I got exposed to it at like 10 or 11. And then that definitely defined a lot of my middle and high school years was just this battle with porn, really being exposed to it at an age where you really can't say no to it. Like that's the hard thing, even looking back, like when an 11-year-old sees porn, like it's hard to not. Like it really is. It's literally, like, chemically speaking, apart from a like intervention of God, it's impossible to not look. And it's like giving a kid cocaine. Like you can't not say the no to the cocaine at 12. Right. And so wrestling with that attack my life, and then just with that sin, being in and out of it, but each time, even in the middle of that sin, even all alone, right, when I didn't tell anyone, and thinking I was just kind of this isolated pervert at this age, always going to Jesus, right? Always going to Jesus in repentance and believing he brought that repentance. And then at about 16, 17, I think, I was at camp and they were really talking about bringing things into the light, like that when it says like walk in the light as I am in light, that's this idea of walking in truth and that people need to know, right? It's not just you and God, you have a family that can help you. And so that's when I started to really be more serious about, hey, I want to just share this with people. I want to talk to people about it, just be honest and vulnerable. And he started to bring some healing from that, right? And that healing continued in greater measure, in greater degree as I continued to battle with it, just do war with it over my whole time through college up into marriage, and I've been set free from that, thankfully. And it was also in that time, about 18, 19, when I read a couple things that I think really really like spoke to the core of who I was. Things that I felt very early, like even just wanting to desire God, speak to God. And I think it was, I was at the camp, 18-year-old, last year at camp, I think. And there was this guy who gave this talk on praying. And I remember he was saying, like, you should just talk to God like he's a friend, right? He should, like you don't have to like think of all these right things to say, just approach him as a friend and just tell him your favorite color, I think was what he said. And so I remember having this walk with God, and I remember just like being like, hey, God, my favorite color is green, and he took me down, and I just was walking with him, and I felt like he just like showed me this thing across the river, and it was just this green, like, algae or whatever, I don't know, like grass, but it was just really vibrant, really beautiful. And I really felt like God said, like, there's a green for you, right? And it was just this really simple thing, but it was just this, one of those first times I really remember hearing the voice of God, and it's not like an inaudible voice. It's not something you necessarily hear, right? But your spirit speaks to you. And it's like, I think it's God just saying, I love you. Right in that moment. It's not even anything about you need to go do this, or it's like, no, it's like he just wants to speak with you and be with you because he wants to be your friend, right? He wants that friendship and that intimacy with God. And so that was kind of where it started, was this idea of friendship with God. And I have not walked faithfully in that, right? Even pursuing that like friendship, but that's kind of that first experience. And then later at 19, I think first year of college, I read A.W. Tozer's The Pursuit of God. And that book, man, that is like, if you could read one book, I give it actually for our youth group, when somebody graduates youth group, that's the book, I give them like a gift card, right? And I give them The Pursuit of God, because like, if we can just, if they want one thing, right, is to pursue God and his glory and being with him and experiencing his presence. There's nothing more. So from that, I used to want to go do big things, big places. As I always explain, like go make big movies somewhere or go be president of the United States. I was political dreams and movie dreams. But slowly God has really refined those dreams and sanctified those dreams and called me really back home to like where I grew up, to be a pastor and to be a missionary and to really, my heart and my focus is reaching kids, reaching this youth, this generation, with the love of Jesus, with the presence of Jesus, and maybe potentially being like a lead pastor someday. But right now, my heart and my focus is definitely on youth. And so part of that journey, I helped start a company, Skykine Video Productions, and been leading that for the last 6 years, but actually transitioning out of that now. And but that's a nutshell. I'm not very good at saying things short-winded, but yeah.
No, that's fantastic.
Story.
It's interesting, just because you become a believer and we're saved, we're going to heaven, it doesn't mean life is going to be perfect. We're still in this world. We're in the world, but not of the world. Yet we can still be tempted by the world, right? As we walk by means of the flesh, not by means of the spirit. I think we all do, right? We all struggle with our flesh, but God does the sanctifying, and it's a process, right? And it'll keep happening until he calls us home. But if you don't go through a difficult time, then how on earth can you help someone else who's going through a difficult time, right? So your challenges and struggles are exactly what these kids are probably dealing with as they're growing up at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, whatever. So God has you right where he needs you.
Those challenges and hard things and sin even, right? God redeems to be able to be your testimony, right? Your testimony that's going to be able to impact kids right where they're at, or the people that you're serving right where you're at. And that requires, what I've realized again and again is that it requires more and more and more of the light, right? Like you never just, and I think as being a pastor, this is something I really, and just youth pastor, worship pastor, but really on my heart is like that vulnerability. Like there's often this fear around being vulnerable, especially like lead pastors. I think sometimes feel this fear about being known completely. And I just again and again, like for me, I know that I have to be known entirely and completely so that someone is knowing exactly these are the sins that I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah.
And why am I afraid to share that?
Yeah.
Why am I defined by that? Like, no, I want victory over that. I want purity. I want true holiness. And true holiness and purity only comes through true confession, true pursuit, true repentance. And so I found even with like discipling kids one-on-one, like what I try to do is just be vulnerable. Like I'm not necessarily showing them like, hey, this is the thing that happened, yesterday, right? But I'm very vulnerable about like, this is who I am. This is what I struggle with. Do I spend time with God every day? No. Am I on? I just share them with where I'm at with the journey, right? Thankfully, I am spending more time with God, right, than I was 2 years ago or 1 year ago. But being vulnerable and honest is like, I think just a huge part of that, because it allows you to be like, oh, I actually know this about you, and there's this great thing that Jack Deere talks about. Jack Deere is like, I think he was like second under like John Wimber when they were starting under Vineyard for a while. And man, he has this amazing thing where he talks about how we pastors are almost more guilty of this than most people, is that we sanitize our stories, right? Like we sanitize our stories. We try to tell the sanitized version, right? But and then that just discourages people.
It doesn't help anybody.
It doesn't help anybody because
David
it's like
doesn't struggle. So.
Yeah, and like you talked about this with Mitch Anderson on the podcast I listened to, and it was so good. It was like we talked about going home, right? And what is it like to just go home and be present with your family and actually enjoy them is hard, difficult, right? And if you're just like, oh, I'm a great father and a great dad and I never have struggles, like that's really discouraging.
Yeah, it
for
doesn't
me,
help anybody,
right? Because like I know that for me, I want bedtime a lot of the time, right? Like I want the kids to get to bed. Time, yeah. I want to get to me time, right? And so, but when you're honest and you're pushing towards you're honest, you can't stay there, but you're honest about where you're at. Then you're saying, okay, but what is God calling us to? And how do I actually be present with my family? How do I not fake it, but how do I actually love my family as Christ loves them and reflect his love to them? So
Steve, to know God and to be known by Him, it's you and I being transparent. That's why we come together as brothers. The iron sharpens iron. It's sparks fly. On last week's podcast, if you listen to it, the conversations like this here, a guy was struggling in his marriage, goes to see a pastor, and the pastor's like, just so you know, this is biblical counseling. He goes, yeah, I got that. And then he asks the question, how many good people are in heaven? And the guy's like, I don't know, maybe a few. He goes, there's 0, only forgiven. And realizing that Jesus paid the full price, we can never pay it. Why are we trying? That's not the goal, it is to walk in good works, but not in my works, in His works, that He's already prepared beforehand, and confess my sin when I do sin. And not to sanitize our story, as you put it. That's a really good way of doing that, because we all want to sanitize our story and only just tell I have a bad day here and there. No. What's the real truth? I don't know if you really want to know.
Yeah.
I heard one time I was meeting with a friend of mine, a Christian guy, good guy, just a great guy, loves the Lord. He goes, he's saying to maybe about his wife, he goes, or to a friend, he goes, you wouldn't want to know what goes on in my brain most of the time. I would agree with that. Like, yeah, just, it's wild. So thankfully we have Jesus to confess our sins to.
Absolutely. No. And I think it's hard to talk about all these things because at times it's easy to be misinterpreted, right? Because we're always, the gospel, like what Jesus does and what He achieves for us and what He calls us to is all encompassing. And so you often get people who really focus on, hey, and I think this is the heartbeat, this is the 100% core of the gospel, is your identity in Jesus Christ, right? Like that Jesus paid it all and that you never get beyond Jesus. Jesus is the story. He's everything. So everything you live for is about friendship with Jesus, knowing Jesus, being known by Jesus. And then you start to realize, okay, there is a second part. There is what we are called into, but it's not apart from that. It's not separate from that. And so sometimes I hear people like really are practical in their faith, and it's like, okay, we're going to go do these things. But like, you can't just go be loving, right? You can't just go be joyful. You have to become a loving person, become a joyful person, which is only happens in the presence of Jesus, only happens when we abide in Jesus. And so I don't want to say that like, okay, we're just forgiven and not called to be holy, because I think we are called to be holy. I think we're called to be a holy people, a bride prepared for the bridegroom, right? Pure and holy. And so that doesn't mean perfect, right? That doesn't mean, it just means that, but it also, it's not about being holy or perfect or looking good in front of other people. So that actually incentivizes us to say, I'm going to be as honest as I can with somebody. I want to be as open as I can, as real as I can, because the only person that matters is Jesus, and I can never hide from Him. I can never pretend to be something. All I want to do is live in authenticity with Jesus, and He knows how ugly my pride is. He knows how ugly my view of myself is. He knows all of that. So like, why do I care what somebody else thinks as opposed to what Jesus thinks, right? Like that's
so interesting.
It's like, so I think it is about being transformed into the image of Christ. I want to, like Dallas Willard puts it this way, like discipleship is growing in doing what would Jesus do if He were you? What would Jesus be if He were you? So it's a little different than what would Jesus do. So like, but it's like for you, buddy, like what would Jesus do if He was a father and a husband and a mortgage broker and a business person? It's to like, it's not quite the same as saying, what would Jesus do? Because like, I'm not in Galilee, like.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't there. Yeah.
It wasn't that time. But like, who has He made you to be? Who is the person that you've been created to be before? Like there was a blueprint that was laid out for Buddy, gifts that were given to Buddy, calling that was given to Buddy, that Jesus empowers, Jesus fills us with. And so So it is that, like, because we're created for that. We're created for call. We're created for Jesus, but it can never be like, can never be apart from him, or even for any other goal other than knowing him or loving him. Like, it's not even to earn or prove or none of that. You can't earn anything from Jesus, can't prove yourself before Jesus. Nope. It's only done in friendship with Jesus. Like,
you sound like a pastor or something, David.
I know.
I love it. It's awesome. It's what you're saying is God knows you more than anybody, right? Jesus knows you more than anybody.
Right.
The fear of man is a snare.
Right.
So why are we worried about that?
Right. Yeah. The fear of God is all that. Yeah, exactly.
Let's fear God and,
right.
and live a better life and be authentic and be transparent with him and not run from him.
Right. And being transparent with him requires that you are transparent with other people. Because God is going to tell you, when you're honest with God and when you're listening to the voice of God is going to tell you, go be honest with this person. Go surrender to this person. What are you afraid of? That's what he always, like, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Like, are you afraid of me? Are you afraid of God? Like, are you living in the fear of God? Like, not as like afraid or like cowering, but right. Are you living in the fear of God, or are you afraid of what this person thinks of you and that you'll somehow, everything will crumble if you like let them know who you are?
I think we're honestly afraid of man.
Yeah.
I mean, and we shouldn't be. I mean, God's the creator of all, and he says, come to me, be my friend, be out, confess your sins. He's faithful and just to forgive you of all unrighteousness.
That's right.
He knows everything. We don't hide anything.
Right.
Yeah, we think somehow we're hiding.
Well, and that's why his yoke's easy and his burden is light. His burden is light and his yoke is easy because in him there's rest and there's peace. And when we're fully known, like there's this great song I love is like Will Reagan and United Pursuit. And it's just so simple. It's just like, I find that I'm safe and warm in your loving arms. And then the part goes, you see me, you know me, you love me through and through. And it's like that's what the core of every human wants is to be seen, to be known, to know. Like, I want my wife to know what goes on in my brain. I want
Scary.
I want because I want that opportunity for love. That's supernatural. Like when I let someone in to say, hey, this is, it's like living in that radical vulnerability with others and with your wife opens up the opportunity for them to love you as Jesus.
Yeah.
Because like I remember some of the most times I felt the most loved in my life was when I was struggling with porn while dating Olivia. And each time I'd made this commitment that I was going to tell her. And the times I felt the most loved, and I've told her when I've struggled since, right? And each time I would tell her, it was awful, right? It was just the worst. It's terrible. Like one of the reasons, like, man, it's a lot easier to confess to God sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
He's all right, he's no problem. He's good. But when you confess to this person that you are hoping to marry, it could all crush, it could all fall apart, right?
Yeah.
And it's this vulnerability, right? And she's not even married to you, so there's not even she's not even forced to say, like whatever, like quote unquote forced, right?
Yeah.
But when she then has this opportunity, and she did, to love in a supernatural way, in a way that's not just like from her own strength, but the Spirit's strength in her, right? That like, and man, I felt like the most loved in those moments and changed and worked on. And so it's just, I think it's just, you talked about this earlier. You can't grow unless you go through the hard stuff. And so it's just to say, like, instead of running from the hard stuff, I want to embrace every hard thing and go through it and receive what God wants to give me in it. Like, because he wants more for you through it. He wants to give you something more through it.
It's kind of like Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you, God, are with me. Your rod and your staff. God's going to let us go through the tough times, but he's also with us. So,
well, one of those things about that Psalm 23 is that in just the whole flow of that passage, it's all one thing. We often think of, the streams are over here the green pastures over here and then the valley is over here. It's no, like God brings peace, satisfaction in the midst of our valleys of shadow of death, right? It's like that quote, one of the best verses is, I am sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. It's like that paradox of like...
Is that David?
It's Paul, I think. I think Paul's like, I'm sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. I don't know what... It's in one of those epistles, but...
That's deep. Okay, so you and Olivia have been married for 6 years.
Yeah.
You have 2 kids. Walk us through the journey of, getting married. How'd you propose to her? I'm always curious what that looked like for you. You're still married. That's good.
Yeah.
And then some of your greatest challenges, I know you're extremely authentic and transparent, but my wife and I were just talking recently, like even a week ago, like we've been married for coming up on 32 years and only by God's grace, by the way. Like, how do you deal with me? Like, I'm just this knucklehead, right?
Yeah.
My wife will be agreeing about right now, pretty sure. But, people, we have lots of friends that have gone through divorce. Probably more friends that have gone through divorce than are still married. What age were they when they were divorced? That's an interesting question. My wife's like, think about all the people that we know that have been divorced. When were they divorced? Mostly in their 20s, interestingly enough. That's our conclusion. You're in your 20s still, David. How old are you?
27.
Dude, you're just a baby, man.
That's right.
Baby. Just a baby.
I'm 28 next week, so I guess that...
Brother.
I feel like I'm beyond the age, though, when I need to say, oh, my birthday's
Come on, what is your birthday?
It's the 24th, yeah.
Okay, I'm the 29th. August 29th.
That's right. That's good. It's good month.
Right?
That's right.
That's why we like each other.
That's right.
What are those, how long you been married, all that stuff, but really some of those challenges that in your 20s, David's still trying to find his way. He's a new business owner. God's pulling him into ministry. Some of those challenges that you guys deal with, and how do you get through them? Because that's the only question is, how's God helped you get through those challenges? I'm assuming, being human, you have problems too.
I'm perfect. No.
I
think it's technically, I think it's like the 7th or 8th year of your marriage where like a lot of it, I think by the numbers is when it like starts to break down more, which I think we're on year 7 now. So
I'll be praying for you. Dear Lord.
Let's go. No, I guess I'll start with the first part of the question is our dating and stuff. I do want to share just quickly before I get into the hard stuff. I just hope I don't forget because my mind is ADHD. So remind me to get back to the hard part of the question. I do want to share. I am always very proud of the way I proposed, but it's my pride coming through. But no,
you can be proud without being proud.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I knew really early. I knew I wanted to marry her pretty early on. Like I remember after the first long conversation we had, I went into the bathroom and I was like literally like, I can't believe I just met my wife. Like that's what I was thinking. And not met, but had this conversation. I can't believe this is happening. And so about a year into our dating, I started to write these letters where like the first letter of the second line would eventually spell, will you marry me? Right. So then by 2 years after that, I'd written like 15 letters and she put them all together. But like, it was like, and I took her to this place and I was like, and then all the 15 letters, if you put them together would spell that, will you marry me? Right. Which is to show like for a long time, I wanted to marry her and I knew that this was going to be a thing. And now the way it actually happened, she didn't actually enjoy the proposal very much. So, because she had planned this surprise birthday party for me. And then I figured out that she had surprised my birthday. So I was like, you know what I should do is I should surprise her with the birthday with the proposal when she thinks that she's surprised me with the birthday party, right? Yeah. And so then I was like, okay. So I worked with him like, hey, we're going to switch the location of the party from your house to this like random church out in the like country. So it's a pretty place to like propose. And so she's there though. And I'm proposing, I'm going through, I think she's like figured out like that, hey, there's nobody here, where I'm proposing to you, that there wouldn't be other people. But the whole time she's worried that the people are all there just waiting for us for the party, and she, if you know her, she'd be the last person that would want anyone there for a proposal, right? It's like if the worst thing, the way to get her to say no would be like, I'm going to do it at like a Blazers game, right? Like no. So like she was just a little worried the whole time. So like, I was like, So like we propose and she's like happy, but then she just we keep walking around. She's just looking around, at like barns and stuff. It's like, where are the people? I'm like, the people aren't here, right? Like they're at the party, like which we're going to go to, which is an engagement party now. So, but that's a story. For her and me, the secret, whatever, like, I don't know, like it is all about like communication, radical vulnerability. Like we really do. We practice that a lot. Like I just am honest about everything, and she's honest about things. Like, I mean, we talk about this, like, even when there's times like we talk about like what goes on in your brain, right? Like when you're attracted to somebody, right? You're not supposed to be attracted to somebody, but like when you're attracted to somebody, like not necessarily being like, hey, it's just like, when you're not lusting after that person, right? Obviously that's a sin. But when you're attracted to somebody and you're like, hey, like sometimes just talking about it with her, as I've done, like there's just these interesting things that like, I'll let her into this part of me that like, oh, I don't think I could ever like just admit that I'm attracted to this other person or whatever, that actually like brings such deep connection and deeper levels of intimacy. And so, yeah, we struggle when we're watching a lot of TV, not spending time talking and having those conversations, and like I'm distant, but when we're being intentional about like talking, connecting, just praying, like all those things, like that's huge. That's huge for us. And so I think we've been blessed just by the fact that we're very compatible. Like, we don't fight very much. Like this sounds like, this is like really awful. Like this isn't very like encouraging, but we really don't fight very much. Like actually, I remember when we were dating, I tried to yell one time over some Taco Bell, and she just, because I grew up in an Italian house where everyone yelled all the time. And it's just, I was just talking, right? Yeah. And you go to my house and it's literally like my parents' house, and everyone talks over each other the whole time.
No kidding.
Yeah. It's just like,
hilarious.
It's Italian. Like everyone's
I love it.
And so me just learning to not talk over people is its own thing. But yeah, I remember trying to yell at her one time. It was like early-ish, and she just starts crying. And she just shuts down entirely. And I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work, right? Like, that's just what I remember. I was like, all right, I'm not going to be able to solve issues this way. And so it just kind of connected that, like, this isn't ever going to be okay, right? Like, and so that's been really helpful to help save me from that, because I used to struggle a lot with anger as a kid. Yeah. But, like, just taking yelling off the table has been really helpful, taking some of that stuff. And so we still get angry, and, like, we've worked through a lot about like just our different personalities. Like she shuts down a lot more, like won't say things. And I'm always like trying to get it out of her, like, hey, be authentic, but we've grown in that. Like, what does it look like for me to be patient with her, for her to open up more, and then vice versa. For me, even though I look authentic, for me to care a lot more about not just getting to a good outcome, like, like I'm going to get through this so I can get to feeling happy, to like actually processing emotion, being okay with not being okay for a while. And like,
that's good.
Yeah. So I'm really blessed. I'm really thankful for her. And I just think it's just about communication and loving Jesus, keeping Jesus the center. Like we both like really desire heaven. Like it sounds super weird. Yeah. What I desire the most is like the new heavens and new earth. Yeah. And like, it's actually not her. Like it's my desire Jesus the most.
Has to be.
And then when you desire Jesus the most, and then you start to see how your love for her pales in comparison to his love for her, then you start to like not be like blaming her for not loving you how you should be loved. And you start to just get out of that, and you start to say like, oh no, like look how far short I am of loving her the way Jesus loves her. And Jesus must love her so much.
And then he calls you, David,
and then he calls her
to love your wife as Christ.
As Christ.
Does the church.
As the church, right.
Do that one.
Yeah. We talk about all the things like, so you talked about this being perfect and forget. Like it's like, and this is the other thing. What's the greatest commandment?
Love the Lord God with all your heart,
yes.
mind, and soul, and strength.
Right. Love. So when we think about being vulnerable, we often think about these big sins, this sin, that sin, that sin. When we start to realize that we're so often so guilty of falling short of the most important commandment, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Then we start to like put into perspective, okay, I might think this other ugly sin is worse than this, but this is what I'm called
and
to.
then the second greatest commandment is what?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And who's your first neighbor?
Your wife.
Your wife. Right?
And that may be
That's
the
right.
toughest one, just because you're with them all the time. And
Yeah, the closest. Hey, what's the whole saying? Like, high fences make good neighbors, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, and there's no fences with your wife, or there shouldn't be, right?
No
Sadly,
fences.
I think they do sometimes build, but yeah.
So David, walk me through a little bit about the journey of, having kids. And I know your little boy has cerebral palsy. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Just, the challenge of what God's allowed you to endure, embrace, and the joy of that. That's something I want to hear you talk about, some of those challenges of having kids, what that look like.
Yeah. So with kids, I remember with Nova, it was like when we first had Nova, kids are awesome because kids are like, they really reveal your selfishness well, right? They're like, oh man, all my time is gone and I need to not be selfish. And then slowly kind of took that to the next level. So, when we found out he was sick and just that whole process of basically just, 4 months living, like just being up at OHSU, worrying, like just in prayer. And I really believe God like healed him in the womb. Like I believe that. I believe like there were people that came over and prayed and especially at that 20-week mark, right when we found out like just the differences between that and the next ultrasound, like I think God has done a lot of healing in his life. So I'm very, very thankful for that. And so when he was born, it was hard, but I was just overwhelmed. I think we were just so overwhelmed with thankfulness because of how healthy he was. And that God had like taken this like thing that when I remember crying out, like if there's just like 2% chance he could live, like can we just, and to see where he is without having that hope initially is so amazing. And so like keeping that in the fore, last night we were literally looking at like some old ultrasound pictures, the first ultrasound, and you can just see him. It's just like it's all like there's no space. You compare it with like Nova's ultrasound and it's like she's got all this room and he's just like crammed in there and like it looks like it's hard to breathe. And then you just look at him now and it's like it's so amazing. And I'm consistently blown away. Like we sometimes just like, I know my wife and I, we'll worry about, is he going to walk or is he going to talk? And just like now he's cruising in a walker and he's using sign language and like, it's just amazing to see his faithfulness. And then beyond that, like his love, this kid's ability for joy and love. I've never met a kid that just makes me as happy when his smile and his just heart and I don't know. It's like, it's just this gift. It's this gift to be able to, yes, minister to other people who are going through a hard time potentially, but it's also like to be able to see God's blessing in the midst of hardship and his like blessing in the midst of sickness, because we know that like in heaven, he's not going to be sick, and we pray and we need to be faithful in praying for him, for healing. I want to continue to be faithful in that, even if it never comes, and being okay with that, but knowing that it will come. It's going to come for sure in heaven, right? So understanding that this isn't how it's meant to be yet. Like all things in life, like our sin, like our stories, God redeems it and God brings like greater joy out of it. And so, I don't know, I've been so thankful. And my wife, it's hard for her. I mean, she's the one who like just takes him to appointments, like multiple appointments a week usually, and is just caretaking and going all these extra, still feed him, there's a lot more for her and for us, but also seeing the joy and her love for him and his faithfulness and all that. So,
yeah. What a great story. God is good and he redeems people, he's a God of redemption for sure. Walk us through, we talked about the word revival. I know you went to an event recently in February?
Yeah.
And then lead into, let's end on where God has you today in ministry and kind of the challenge with that and what he's calling you to do.
Yeah. So, it's amazing timing, this interview, because I feel like God has kind of, even yesterday, just brought such, like there's just these periods of stepping out and risk. And then there's moments of those answer where you're like, he starts to just, I don't know, just continue like confirm what he set you on. So yeah, I'll start with, I told the very beginning of the story a while ago, which is just, I was going through this time of like hardship in the business, starting to be at joy, at peace with what he feeling that he had something more for me. And then it was Super Bowl Sunday when I heard of this thing called the Asbury Revival. And I don't go to like a Pentecostal church or anything like that. It was just something that one of our elders texted and was like, hey, have you seen what's going on in Asbury? And what happened in Asbury, it's a college in Kentucky, was that these students had started just breaking out into worship and prayer and confession, and it had just gone nonstop for days on end. And it basically was, I think it was the 2-week mark when I found out, or the first week mark, and it was just keep going. It was 24 hours and a day. And it was like, hey, this looks like revival. This was very well could be revival. And, and I was like, I threw out in like a text thread, hey, jokingly, like, maybe we should go. But I wasn't serious. And then one of my youth called the next day later that night. And he was like, hey, I really feel like we should go. We should drive. And me and Seven, who's another kid in our youth, they're like in college now, but they're both going to go, but they need like someone to go with them. They need like an adult to go with them or whatever, because their parents were concerned about their car breaking down. And then, so I started praying. I was like, I'll pray about it. And then that night, man, really felt confirmed like I should go. And then that morning, another elder was like, he was going to go, and he'd raised all the money overnight on Facebook to go take this. And so we drove across the country to Asbury. We drove. Yeah. It was like 40 hours.
That's a long drive.
We stopped once for a night. Like we went through the night, and this is winter, right? We're like through the night on like Utah. Like it's just, there's like semis on their heads as you're driving, and you're like, all right, like I'm driving on ice, and I'm like, I don't even know. And we may have forgotten the chains, but it's okay. And so we made it there. And man, I remember that first night just going down to the altar, not even wanting to go, because I was like, feeling a little bit like, but then being pulled, and man, God just meeting me in his presence and just starting to rip open and do, I heard it described that the glory of God, when God manifests his presence in his people, there's this opportunity for like this, him to just like break you open to start to do operation on you, like to do surgery on your soul. And that's what it felt like. And just that time there, man, there were just times where, man, and it was just the whole time. Like, yeah, that for me, he did particular work that first night on the altar, but also just the whole week. It wasn't like it diminished. It was just more and more he was doing in his glory, and the Spirit of God just filled that place. Yeah. And people were broken, and he was changing lives and working. And man, there was one time where we broke out singing the Agnus Dei, which is just, and I can't remember, which is just, it's the old Michael W. Smith song. And it's not coming to me, but man, it just wouldn't end. It just like was like an hour of just people just singing, and the worship team is just bowing. It's just incredible. And and in that moment, it was like, in particular, it was like, man, it was like, there were moments like that where like the heavens felt so close. Like it was like we were surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses doing this together, praising God together, which is what we are doing. And so from that, I was on my trip back, and I was in the car praying, and I felt like, hey, David, it might be time to leave Skykine. And I felt this for a while. Like I've been balancing both being youth pastor, worship pastor, and leading Skykine for a while. And I felt this in the car, like, hey, I think you might need to prepare for revival, almost is kind of the thought. And so after that, I wrestled with it, prayed about it for a couple of weeks after that, and then eventually talked with the other owner, the majority owner of the company, and he was also like very on board with me doing it. And so started to step away so that I could pursue just full-time youth, working with youth in schools, and just doing whatever God to kind of open the door. And so that's what I'm pursuing, that full time. And so I've been raising support over the last 6 months, and just starting that journey, and to supplement what I'm being paid from the church. And man, it's been incredible how talking of a hard time, it's like there's been moments where like it's like God just wants, like I'll be in these times with God, it's like he just wants more. He's like, okay, you need to take a bigger risk. You need to just like stop playing, like you really have to trust me. Like stop kind of trusting me, really trust me with your finances, with your money, like with all of those things. Yeah. And I feel like yesterday, man, like I've been in a long he's provided over half of what I need to, or about half of what I needed to raise, which has been amazing. It's just seeing the generosity of people. And then yesterday, he provided this amazing opportunity in a Christian school to be able to be a sub there, but also lead their like youth club that they have, kind of like a little youth group, and chapel and the camp they do. And so just, and in the Staten area, so with the students that I'm already working with. And so just amazing how God like opens these doors as we are faithful to just like be able to take that leap. As when he's calling you to be like, and to knock on the door sometimes, to be like, okay, I feel like this. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to go take this step because I really feel as good as I can feel about this. Like my wife had this crazy level of peace, right? We're like, hey, we're going to start taking pay cuts from Skykine as I make this transition, and we're going to start raising support. And it's just like, and her like level of peace about that was just crazy. And she's at times, and there's been times where I'll feel more peace and she'll be stressed, and then she'll feel peace and I'll be stressed. And it's like, God's not looking for us to do this perfectly. Like I've had real moments of fear and like, and real moments of like, this doesn't a lot of money left. But God but then continually like, okay, but I'm going to keep trusting you. And I'm going to keep doing what's right. I'm going to keep saying yes to when I feel like this is what it is. This is what I need to do. And so even if you feel afraid, even if you don't necessarily want to, if you're still continuing to do it and continue to trust him when you don't feel it, like he's going to honor that, and he's going to bring what he and confirm it. And so it's been a beautiful, like, it's interesting we're having this because like literally yesterday and today I felt this, you have those periods of like where God like again is like, yes, this is where you're going. This is what I want for you. So yeah, it's been amazing. I'm really praying. I'm really, and what I said in terms, we talked about revival, and what I think about revival, man, it's what my heart's desire is revival. Like, and I think I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, we talk about revival a lot. Like a lot of people are like, man, I really desire revival. Yeah. But do we even like, but are we willing to do what, but are we willing to pursue it, to seek it, to seek it? And it's not it. Like, it's a gift. Like it's just, you can't seek it apart from the giver. Yeah. Right? You have to seek the giver. And so I think the heart of revival, the heart of Asbury, and what they actually said at Asbury, which came to my mind this morning, and I said it it was my 7th point, which is that my desire is that our kids would know nothing else than churches filled with the glory of God. You can fake a lot of things at church, right? You can like, but churches are not good preaching. They're not good programs. They're not even your ministries. They're none of that. Oh. It's not what man can do. Churches are about seeking God's power, seeking his presence, seeking his face. It's what Paul says in Corinthians, I didn't come to you with eloquent words. I didn't come to you with human wisdom. I came to you with simple words so that the power of God might be on display. And that's what, man, in Asbury, there was no fine words. There was no big bands. There was no flashy lights. None of that. It was literally a cajon and a guitar and piano and people going up and talking. I don't know their names to this day, right? But the person who was on display, the person who was being worshiped and on display was Jesus and his power and his, and that's what I long for. And, I long, and that's what I mean by revival. Like, I think about what it's done in my heart. Like, I think about where I am today, even where I was set. And it's not that I haven't been walking with God or even pursuing him before, but like when you're in revival, it's like he pushes the fast forward button a little bit, right? Like, it's like he does surgery on your heart and he yields it more and more to you. And so when I think about revival, man, that's what I long. It's like, it really is like the only thing more powerful than the forces of darkness in this generation like Gen Z. And I mean, they've been attacked a lot, and we're all attacked, but they're particularly attacked. Is the only thing more powerful than that is the Spirit of God. It's the presence of God. Like, and in comparison, like when you experience the presence of God, which can't be manufactured, it can be pursued, right? But only out of love and just wanting him, Like, it's not about anything he gives, right? Just him. When you see that and you compare it with what we try to do, it just, the difference is so real, right? Like, the difference is so real. And so our, like, has revival come, like, to Staten or Salem? Like, I don't necessarily, like, think so. I don't think it's necessarily like that it's in its fullness. But I do feel like God is really at work, tilling the ground, preparing the soil, and starting the seed, potentially that I hope, that I pray for, that I desire, that I yearn, is the glory of God manifesting in our midst to bring people to Himself, right? And so that's my prayer, and that's, yeah,
You're sticking to it.
That's all I want. Yeah,
Bro, that was really heavy. That was profound what God's doing in your life. As a young guy, at 27, I was nowhere. I was a new believer. I always tell people I didn't know one Bible verse when I came to the Lord at 27. And I grew up in church. So to see where you're at, what God's doing in your life is really profound. So we're going to wrap up, but here's what I want to, is there any last words of wisdom? And then how do people support David in his ministry? Where do they find you to go, hey, I like what you're about. I'm all in. I commit to providing whatever God wants me to provide, whether it's prayer, money, support, however. How do they get a hold of you? How do they contact you? How do they give?
Yeah. So I'll just, to give and to support what we're doing, man, I would, if anyone is interested in that, humbled. And by the time this airs, because it's not airing right now, right? It's airing in like a week, okay?
1 week.
So by the time this airs, I will really try to have a website up called gotogenz.com, which is what I've been working on, and it's connected. So you'll be giving through my church to support pastoral residency program that they have. So there'll be a link there. I'm kind of on missionary through my church, which is Grace Bible Fellowship in Staten. And so that's who you'll be giving to, not just giving to me individually.
Yeah.
So there's that accountability there and that structure there. But also, yeah, I'll be having I'm linking a URL to that called gotogenz.com. And then if that's not up, it'll also be on Grace's gracestaten.org on the pastoral residency page there. So yeah, that's the places to find me, to get in touch with me. You can also go through Skykine Video Production and search me down that way, whatever. There's different ways. If you are interested in giving, don't just like give online, right? I just want to I want to just meet and have a conversation. Yeah. It's all about relationship. This isn't like an organization. This is just like building a relationship and a friendship. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. My phone number is 503-979-2141, 503-979-2141. So yeah, just give me a call straight. Like, yeah, it's not about going through a website or whatever. Like, I just want to build relationship and include you. And that the whole website is just to keep people who are supporting and praying for us to just update them and that. So not anything separate, not like an organization or building a nonprofit, just one relationship that's it. But yeah, I in terms of last words, I think the biggest thing, the most important thing, I think Mike Bickle say this, and I think this is so true. Mike Bickle's he's like the founder of IHOP, International House of Prayer, and he talks about how he longs for the first commandment to be in first place in the church. That our whole churches are just about loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And it's not just emotional, right? But it is not emotional, right? Like, it's like, it's all of you. It's your heart, it's your soul, it's your mind, and it's your strength, right? It's all of it. And desiring that in unity. That's what unifies the church, is when we're focused on that, right? We can come together as these different tribes, and just realizing that all these denominations, when they're faithful, are usually more like just disciples arguing who's better than the other, right? It's like, I'm the greatest disciple over here. But like that's when our eyes are off Jesus. Is it when we have unity coming together, focused around loving, pursuing, praying, seeking the face of Jesus. Like that's what it matters. That's what matters. And that's abiding in the love of Jesus. And so, that'd be it.
Wow.
And on the whole 27-year-old thing, it's, I don't know. I am humbled by what God has done in my life at an early age. But I don't think it's like a special thing outside. I think I've seen other 27-year-olds. I've seen 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, I think are just filled with this passion and filled with the Spirit. And I don't think it has to do with age or any of that. I think it just has to do with proximity to Jesus and allowing yourself to do it. And it's like, you talked about this, like, it's not about being qualified. It's not. It's just about following the call of Jesus and then trusting him to give you what he needs.
Yeah.
Right. And how often do we back away out of fear? Like, I'm too young. I've had that all the time. I always have this fear of like, I'm too young. I'm too excitable. I have too much ADHD. I'm too my mind is too much all over the place. Like, I'm too emotional. All of those things, like, my personality isn't right. All of those things those are just the fear that keeps us back from just saying yes to Jesus and then realizing like, okay, he's going to work as I just yield and give and it's going to be good. It's going to be joyful. So,
and the good news is we were made in his image.
Yeah.
And so who are we to say we're not good enough or qualified? We're made in his image. He made us. He wired you, David, exactly the way you wanted to. You're perfect. You're imperfectly perfect.
That's an amazing way to put it. You're imperfectly.
Yeah.
He before the creation of the world had the Buddy blueprint ready.
Yeah. I know Buddy, and he's definitely imperfect. My wife knows me pretty well too, but God's ways are higher than our ways. So, well, hey, let's wrap up right now. David, it's been a pleasure just hearing your story. I know you really well, but I always learn new things about people on this show, on this podcast. So it's a great joy to really hear more about your passion and what's on your heart. So thanks for being a part of our show. Thank you for all who listen every week. I hope you get a lot out of this message from David. I hope you'll support him. You'll pray for him, however God calls you to. And again, if you want to be on the show, we'd love to have you. If you know somebody who wants to be on the show, please reach out to me as well. We'd love to have you. Well, we will see you next week, and thank you again for listening. Have a great week.